The phone call. In the quaint town of Elmridge, nestled amidst the foggy moors, lived a woman named Elizabeth. She was a recluse, preferring the solitude of her cozy cottage to the prying eyes of the world. Her days were spent tending to her garden and thumbing through the pages of old books which she made a living by converting them to audiobooks. But one night, as the clock struck midnight, her tranquil life would turn into a nightmare. It began innocently enough. A faint ringing pierced the silence, pulling Elizabeth from her slumber. Groggy and disoriented, she answered the phone, expecting a telemarketer's voice on the other end. But all she heard was a strange static, like whispers from beyond. She dismissed it as a faulty line and returned to bed. The following night, the call came again. Elizabeth hesitated but picked up the receiver, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hello?" she called out, hoping for an answer. This time, there was a faint whisper, a name she thought she'd never hear again, her long-lost cousin, Clara, who had vanished without a trace years ago. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat. Clara had gone missing years ago, and the town mourned her loss, believing she had met a tragic fate, due to the fact that she spent her weekends at bars and was often known to pick up strange men. Elizabeth with the rest of the family feared she had been raped and murdered, her body chopped up and buried in some undisclosed location. Yet here she was, speaking through the phone receiver. Tears filled Elizabeth's eyes as she tried to comprehend the impossible. "Clara, where are you? Are you okay?" But she got no response. Just dead air on the other line. The next night at precisely midnight, Elizabeth got another phone call. This time when she inquired about Clara's whereabouts and situation, she could hear Clara trying to respond, but it was as if she was in a poor reception location and her words kept breaking up, being unintelligible at best. The voice grew clearer each night, its tone pleading, desperate to be heard. Clara spoke of pain and suffering, of being trapped in a dark realm, yearning to find peace. She begged Elizabeth to help her find release from the torment she was enduring. Elizabeth had always hoped her cousin had just ran away with some guy she had met, but now it was obvious she had indeed been murdered and her soul was trapped, unable to rest in peace. Torn between skepticism and longing, Elizabeth decided to investigate further. She delved into old family archives, seeking answers about Clara's mysterious disappearance. But to her dismay, the records offered no explanation. Clara's vanishing remained an unsolved mystery. Even the police had come up empty-handed, as Clara had been known to come and go with so many different men when she went out drinking that it was almost impossible to remember what the guy she had left the bars with looked on the night of her disappearance. The calls persisted, and Elizabeth's sleep schedule changed so that she would never miss a call. She was a woman haunted by the unsettling conversations. As the weeks turned into months, she grew more convinced that Clara's soul was trapped in the void between life and death. The lines blurred, and Elizabeth found herself questioning her reality. One night, as the clock struck midnight, Clara's voice resonated with urgency. "Beth, you must come to me," she implored. "There is an ancient ritual that can free my soul, but you must perform it in the cemetery, under the waning moon." Elizabeth had long been fascinated with books of the occult and paranormal, and was almost certain of the ritual that needed to be performed. Torn between fear and hope, Elizabeth couldn't ignore her cousin's plea. The following night, with trepidation in her heart, she ventured to the old graveyard, clutching a candle and a dusty book of dark rituals. As she recited the ancient incantation, the air grew heavy, and an eerie wind rustled the leaves of the tombstones. At first nothing happened, but soon the moon faded away behind dark clouds. A spectral figure materialized before Elizabeth, bearing Clara's likeness, but its eyes were empty voids. "You have done well to come," it hissed, its voice an unnatural blend of Clara's and something sinister. "Now, complete the ritual. Set me free." As Elizabeth hesitated, her doubts resurfaced. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What are you?" The entity laughed, a bone-chilling sound that echoed through the graveyard. "I am a being that thrives on despair and sorrow," it revealed. "Clara's suffering feeds me, and I have taken on her form to trap her essence for eternity. but I want more. Your soul is now what I crave to feed on. It is you who will also be trapped with me in the darkest depths of hell." Realization struck Elizabeth like a bolt of lightning. The midnight caller was not her long-lost cousin, but a malevolent entity, toying with her emotions. Anger surged within her, fueling her determination to confront the demonic imposter. With newfound courage, Elizabeth uttered the forbidden words of banishment, aiming to sever the entity's connection to Clara's soul. The creature shrieked in fury, its ghastly form contorting as it fought to maintain its facade. But Elizabeth held steadfast, the light of her love for Clara shielding her from the darkness. The entity's grip weakened, its form flickering like a dying candle. And with one final incantation, Elizabeth banished the malevolent presence back to the shadows from whence it came. The graveyard fell silent, and the moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting an ethereal glow. Elizabeth felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but her heart ached for her cousin. Elizabeth stood up from where she had been kneeling, and as she did so, she heard her name being whispered from behind her. She spun around and once again saw her cousin Clara, only this time it appeared to be in the flesh. Elizabeth smiled and called out, "Clara, is that really you?" Clara smiled back and nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She opened her arms for a hug, and Elizabeth ran towards her, the two embracing each other in a hug. Elizabeth couldn't believe it. Her cousin had returned, and it was all because of her courage and determination to find her. Elizabeth went to pull away so that she could look Clara in the face, but when she went to do so, her cousin wouldn't relinquish her grasp. If anything, she started to squeeze Elizabeth even tighter. "Clara!" She coughed, "Let go, I can't breathe." Clara brought her lips to Elizabeth's ear and whispered, "That's the point, love," and began to cackle an otherworldly laugh. Clara squeezed even tighter, and Elizabeth could hear the sound of her bones beginning to pop and crack. Elizabeth fought with all of her might, but was unable to free herself. She began to feel herself sinking, and as she looked down, she could see the ground slowly opening up, swallowing the two of them whole. Elizabeth began screaming for help, but her pleas for help were not to be heard. Eventually the two women were completely consumed by the ground, neither one of them to ever be heard from again. It took several weeks for Elizabeth's presence to be missed. Her being a recluse, it wasn't unusual for her to go days, even weeks, without setting foot outside of her house. Thanks to the internet, she was able to get most of the things she needed, like groceries, delivered to her house from online shopping. And her living had been made online too, converting books to audio files. She had lived that lifestyle for over a decade, and so when she turned up missing to her friends and family, the loss was now more permanent. Her absence was something they had already become familiar with, so their day-to-day lives didn't really change with her vanishing. The true chilling horror to this tale being that all loners and recluses will seldom be missed when their lives are cut short from this realm.